closest to the front.
So if I could have any supporters who would like to hold signs, we would love to have you up front. And if I could have my speakers.
Okay. Here we go. Let's stand up front. Okay. Which side do you
Let's
want
just,
me?
I think you're good back here, and why don't my speakers just center a little bit?
Okay.
Alright. Alright, so I don't wanna block anybody here, so maybe let me get in the middle. Let's spread out just a hair. Alright. And if anybody, any supporters would like a sign, I think we're pretty good there. We'll go ahead and just leave a moment for photos. Yeah, that's okay, we'll get we'll get you on the other side there.
Oh, sorry. You'll be behind her.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe go to the end there. All right. And if you'd like to take a minute, All right, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Katie Baker, and I am here on behalf of Americans for Contraception to celebrate World Contraception Day, but also sound the alarm on threats to our right to contraception. Our organization formed in response to the Dobbs decision, which was catastrophic for our reproductive freedom in Virginia and across the country. And for those of you who read the opinion, in the concurrence, Justice Thomas said that the court should reconsider Griswold v. Connecticut, which is the case that protected the right to contraception next. So we've seen attacks on abortion, we've seen attacks earlier this year on IVF in Alabama, and we're beginning to see attacks on contraception. Thankfully, at the federal level, we have Congresswoman Kathy Manning from North Carolina who has introduced legislation to pass a federal Right to Contraception Act so that if that Griswold case falls, we will still have our right to contraception protected. Unfortunately, in 2022, when that vote came up, 195 House Republicans voted against it. It came up again this year, before the U.S. Senate, and we could not get to those 60 votes that we needed to get to a vote on the substance of the bill. We had a couple Republicans join us, Senator Murkowski, as well as Susan Collins, but unfortunately, there just was not enough Republican support for the right to contraception in U.S. Congress. So we're here today, joined by champions of the right to contraception, and I'm just so honored to have champions here in Mr. Eugene Vindman, in our state legislators, and our advocates. I also want to recognize another champion. I see Delegate Luke Torian in the room. Thank you so much for being here. And so with that, I want to go ahead and kick it off and introduce Mr. Eugene Vindman, a veteran who has fought for our freedoms, including reproductive freedom.
Well, thank you so much, Katie. So, first of all, thank you everyone for coming to today's event to recognize World Contraception Day, which actually follows on the heels of National Daughters Day that I celebrated with my daughter yesterday. So, I care deeply about this issue. My name is Eugene Vindman, and let me be very clear. I unequivocally support protecting the right to contraception. Since the Supreme Court, this extreme Supreme Court, overturned Roe v. Wade, contraception, like abortion rights and IVF, has been under threat by MAGA extremists across the country. This is an issue where extremists in the MAGA movement are taking away a woman's fundamental freedoms and putting them in danger. Many forms of contraception are essential to serious conditions women face, and politicians who want to get between those women and their doctors have no place serving in office. And when they are, they pass extreme legislation to restrict women's freedoms. 195 Republicans in Congress voted against the Right to Contraception Act in 2022. And then the Senate Republicans this year blocked passage of a bill this year. Here in Virginia, the Virginia Right to Contraception Act was vetoed. What we need are real leaders who will strongly support the right to contraception, from Congress to every state house across this country. With the overturning of Roe v. Wade, we learned that we cannot take our constitutional rights for granted. Far-right extremists on the Supreme Court have made it clear that they want to overturn Griswold v. Connecticut, the case that found contraception is a constitutional right and a part of a series of attacks on privacy that the court has made. This is extremism at its worst and an existential threat to fundamental freedom. Freedoms that I spent 25 years in uniform defending. I'm honored to be here to uplift our brave and powerful storytellers, because they are the ones we're fighting for. Contraception allows Virginians to plan their families and treat health conditions like endometriosis. We've seen MAGA extremists dodge when it comes to making clear their positions on protecting women's rights to choose. And that's why we need leaders who will not back down from fighting for reproductive freedom today, tomorrow, and for years to come until we fully secure that right. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Vindman. And you spoke to the state legislation as well. Americans for Contraception has been supportive of efforts in the General Assembly to pass a Right to Contraception Act here in Virginia. We are lucky in Virginia. We are the last bastion of reproductive freedom in the South, thanks to Democrats in our General Assembly, including delegates Candy King and Brianna Sewell, who are here today. But unfortunately, we passed a bill this year sponsored by Delegate Marcia Price from Newport News and Senator Ghazala Hashmi from Chesterfield County to codify that right to contraception. It mirrored the federal bill. It was vetoed by Governor Glenn Youngkin, as Mr. Vindman mentioned. So I do want to introduce one of our champions of contraception in the General Assembly, Delegate Candy King.
Thank you. Good afternoon, and thank you all for being here today. Many of you know I'm Delegate Candy Munthin King. I represent Prince William and Stafford counties in the Virginia General Assembly. But before any of that, I am the mother of 2 daughters, and my daughters are growing up with fewer reproductive rights than I had. That is thanks to MAGA extremists like Donald Trump and Glenn Youngkin. But Donald Trump, who stacked the Supreme Court, now that same extremist court is threatening the right to contraceptives. We've heard it. Griswold, whether it's Griswold or a nationwide abortion ban. MAGA extremists want to make our country a place where women are not able to make their own health decisions. My daughters deserve bodily autonomy and reproductive freedom. And this is personal. Many of you know that September is also Sickle Cell Awareness Month. Sickle cell disease is a painful, debilitating disease. In our community, in Prince William County, we have the fastest growing population of babies diagnosed with sickle cell disease. When those babies become young women and need access to contraceptions, Donald Trump and Glenn Youngkin are trying to create a Virginia where they will have to suffer debilitating pain and the potential outcomes, including death, that simple contraceptions can prevent. This is who they are. And we know that our governor is clearly auditioning for whatever his next big role in politics is, whatever that may be. We saw him passed over recently for VP, but that doesn't stop extremists from continuing to try to make our lives as hard as possible. Our governor is a man who was elected with the help of the extremist Susan B. Anthony list. He's a co-patron, they are co-patrons of Project 2025. and they oppose common sense bills this session, like the right to contraception and the Contraceptive Equity Act, which was my legislation that would simply make contraception access zero cost. So for people suffering with PCOS, for people suffering with endometriosis, we have a governor who vetoed a bill that would create access to medicine to treat those conditions. Contraception means more than just the ability to plan if and when someone starts a family. If you are like my sister Delegate Price, who shared her story about how her IUD helps manage PCOS, then you understand that this is a matter of having the medication that you need to be able to go to work, to be able to provide for your family, to be able to live and have life, liberty, and pursue whatever your happiness is. This is what Republicans are trying to deny the women of Virginia. So I'm proud to be here today to hear everyone's stories and share my commitment to ensuring that we continue the fight to pass the Right to Contraception Act in Virginia during the 2025 session. And then, when we get a real governor, maybe we can have a governor who will actually sign legislation that will help women in Virginia get access to the medicine that we need. At the federal level, I cannot overstate how important it is that we have champions who support access to contraception. We cannot allow MAGA extremists to go to Richmond and represent our community and deny our daughters the care that we need. So thank you all so much for being here today.
Thank you so much, Delegate, and thank you for championing your legislation and being such a powerful voice for reproductive freedom in the General Assembly. And next, it is my honor to introduce another champion of reproductive freedom in the General Assembly. Before she was a state legislator, she was a powerful advocate for women and families, and it's just my honor to have Delegate Brianna Sewell here today.
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you to all who are in attendance for joining us for this important press conference. Your silence will not protect you. That was the Audre Lorde quote that my dear friend, colleague, and fellow reproductive rights champion, Delegate Marcia Price, used this past legislative session to share why she was a sponsor of the Virginia Right to Contraception Act. Those words could not ring more true today. If we hadn't spoken out, we would not have put Virginia's MAGA extremist governor on the record as an opponent of protecting access to contraception. If we hadn't spoken out, we would not have collected thousands of signatures from Virginians all across the Commonwealth who strongly support the passage of the Virginia Right to Contraception Act. If we hadn't spoken out, we would not have allowed extremists to continue conflating contraception with abortion. Our stories are having an impact. That is why I'm proud to join everyone here today, to continue sharing our stories and to build power for the reproductive justice movement here in Virginia. I proudly voted yes for the Virginia Rights to Contraception Act. In every zip code, from Arlington to Abingdon to right here as we meet in Woodbridge, Virginia. Virginians rely on contraception to plan their families and to manage health conditions like the one that Delegate Munden King mentioned, PCOS. My colleagues in the House Democratic Caucus, they know this threat is real, which is why every last one of them voted in favor of the Virginia Right to Contraception Act. Yet, unfortunately, Governor Glenn Youngkin vetoed this proposal, and MAGA Republicans in the General Assembly had his back, leaving every Virginian to face an increased risk that our freedom to use contraception, including IUDs, emergency contraceptives, condoms, and the pill, could be taken away. I'm proud to be here with everyone today to hear your stories and to take them with me to the halls of the state legislature, and to continue fighting for the Virginia Right to Contraception Act. But we need help from Congress, and we need it now. And that's why I'm so excited to have the conversation here today. about the Federal Right to Contraception Act. And I hope we are in a position to pass this next year. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much, Delegate. And I wanted to touch on something you said. Unfortunately, every member of the Virginia House and Senate Democrats voted for that bill. But I was looking back at the votes. There were only a handful of Republicans who voted for the bill, and we also saw a few Republicans switch their votes over the course of the bill's life, from committee to when it actually, there was actually a vote on the floor. There was a Republican state legislator whom I noticed did something called gray sheeting his vote, which means, okay, I voted for yes, but I voted yes, but I actually meant to vote no. And we think these people are preserving the right to be able to tell people, depending what audience they're in front of, whether they voted for or against the bill. So I did just want to name that. The fact that anyone would vote against a right to contraception is evidence of the threats against our right to contraception. And so I want to transition now to just recognizing the work of all the powerful advocates here in Virginia who have been incredible reproductive partners to us. And it's my honor to introduce Jamie Lockhart of Planned Parenthood Advocates of Virginia. Jamie.
Thank you so much, Katie. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for being here on this important day, World Contraception Day. As Katie said, I'm Jamie Lockhart, and I have the honor and privilege of serving as Executive Director of Planned Parenthood Advocates of Virginia. Today, we celebrate that contraception is essential for people to control their lives and make informed choices about their reproductive health. We're working for a world where contraception is widely available, free from stigma and discrimination, and meets the needs of all people. A vision that expands access to contraception and ensures that people can make their own decisions about their health, their bodies, and their futures. But as others have said, let's not kid ourselves. This vision is constantly under attack. The freedom to choose whether to use an IUD, implant, condoms, or pills is a deeply personal one. Yet this fundamental right faces unprecedented attacks. The Dobbs decision, which overturned Roe v. Wade, has ignited a wave of efforts across the United States to limit not only abortion access, but also contraception. By dismantling the constitutional right to abortion, the ruling has emboldened anti-reproductive health advocates to target other aspects of reproductive health care. In several states, lawmakers are pushing to restrict access to contraceptives, especially emergency contraception and IUDs. These actions represent a growing threat to birth control access, raising alarms about broader efforts to undermine reproductive rights and personal freedoms. As a result, millions of Americans now face uncertainty about their ability to access basic healthcare services that have long been considered fundamental. What those who attack contraception fail to understand is that contraception is not just about preventing pregnancy. As others have said, it helps manage endometriosis, PCOS, hormonal imbalances, period cramps, acne, and even reduces the risk of cervical and ovarian cancer. Contraception is key to the economic empowerment of all people, giving them the ability to better control their bodies and futures. These are deeply personal medical decisions, and politicians have no business inserting themselves into these matters. Americans do not deserve to live with the uncertainty and chaos that comes with regular attacks to essential health care. We must pass a federal right to Contraception Act and the Virginia Right to Contraception Act to protect our fundamental rights and ensure healthcare decisions are made between individuals and their healthcare providers, not politicians. On World Contraception Day, let's commit to safeguarding reproductive freedom for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jamie. And you really got to the heart of what today is about, which is our freedom. This is about the freedom to plan our own families, and it's also about the freedom to get medical attention and treat our bodies and our health in the way that our doctors recommend, without the insertion of politicians and the state. So the heart of every press event and advocacy fight are storytellers. They're the impacted Virginians who can actually speak to their personal experience about what taking away a right to contraception might mean to them. So it's my honor to introduce another storyteller who also is a leader of one of our, another wonderful partner, Red, Wine, and Blue, and her name is Laura Bury.
Good afternoon. It's so great to be here to talk to you today. I am Laura Bury, the Deputy Director for Red, Wine, and Blue Virginia. We are an organization of over 500,000 women across the nation that organizes locally to fight extremism in our communities. And we've learned from listening to women all across the country that everyone has a reproductive story, and those stories connect us. I am also a Virginia mom, and my daughter, when she was going through puberty, 13 years old, maybe 12 and a half, 13, she was struggling, and it's no picnic for any of us, but what we realized is that what she was struggling with month after month was just not normal. She was missing school, she was missing sports, she was just in a lot of pain. So like any natural parent, I took her to the doctor to get a medical opinion and to have them provide us with a path forward. And what we did find out is that she suffers from an ovarian condition, like mentioned today, and she's not an outlier. There are thousands and thousands of women across the country here in Virginia that suffer from this, and there is a treatment, and the treatment for my daughter was birth control. And that gave her peace. That gave her the ability to live her life. She was a child, and she needed her parents, she needed the medical professionals to let her know what her path forward was. Because without treatment for her, she is looking at a long life of pain, immobility, and potential infertility issues. So she's 24 now, and while she might not be ready to start a family at this moment in her life, she is very much looking forward to starting a family, and now this uncertainty and this chaos, this fear has come back. She's a student, she's working, she's a young adult with all the young adult struggles that come with it. This unnecessary burden should not be a part of her life. And what we should be doing, the fight we should be fighting, the talks we should be having today, is how to make healthcare better and more affordable and more accessible. Not standing here fighting just for us to even have healthcare. I'm angry for her, but I'm angry for everyone because women's healthcare and reproductive issues affect everybody, families, communities, the economy. For me personally, it's gonna affect my daughter. And I don't like having to tell her that we need to talk about what we're gonna do if the unthinkable happens. And by and large, the unthinkable has already happened because it is getting harder to access our basic healthcare. And I do just wanna thank everybody here who is fighting for women's healthcare or starting to fight for women's healthcare, or starting to listen to people's stories and realizing that's me too, or I know somebody. Because we need to just start talking more and letting people know that this is not just a women's issue, this is a society issue, and I will only support politicians who are fighting for women's healthcare, and the only time I want a politician involved in my healthcare is when they are making it more affordable and more accessible. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Laura. for your willingness to share your daughter's story. And next I want to introduce another storyteller, Ms. Val Watkins.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon. I want to thank the Americans for Contraception for their advocacy on the Right to Contraception Act. I want to thank the delegates, all candidates and politicians who are there guaranteeing and fighting for women's right to the whole portfolio of reproductive rights choices. My name is Valeshka Watkins, but everybody calls me Val. I am one of 20% of US women who suffer from adenomyosis. A lot of people are familiar with endometriosis. Adenomyosis is similar in that what would be the healthy tissue, the lining of the uterus, grows where it shouldn't. In my case, it grows into the muscle, into the tissues of the uterus itself. It causes an incredible amount of pain, excessive bleeding, complications that can lead to many different outcomes. In addition to this, I am unlucky enough to also have multiple cysts and polyps growing in my uterus and ovaries. Now, I am one of the multitudes of women in the United States and across the world that relies on contraception, on the pill, on hormonal treatments and others to control these types of reproductive health conditions and to pursue life, liberty, and happiness. I have been using one form of contraception or hormonal treatment or another since before I was engaged in any type of sexual activity, more like the daughter of the previous speaker, simply because I needed something to control the growth and the irregularities in my uterus and ovaries. This has been key to so many of the successes I've had as a regular American, and during the times that I have not had access to healthcare, it has become quite unmanageable. I could share so many stories, but I think the one that is the most shocking is that when I was in law school, I did not have access to healthcare, I did not have health insurance, and couldn't really manage my conditions well. I could feel it. It wasn't easy studying in law school for exams and finals, but it really came to be the most catastrophic in my life one day when, as I was studying, I suddenly felt dizzy and felt all sorts of horrible pain. It turns out one of the polyps that was growing in my uterus had pierced the uterine wall, and so I started bleeding. By the time I stood up, I had already had blood going down my legs. I was lucky enough that I wasn't alone. My friend took me to the hospital. We had towels under me because I continued to bleed. We got to the emergency room, and I could not get immediate care because the type of hospital that we went to and the staff that was there decided that they would wait to try to control the bleeding until they could verify that I wasn't actually experiencing complications from an elective abortion. So they were willing to just leave me there on a seat in a puddle of blood until they could corroborate this. When they did, I had lost so much blood that I needed blood transfusions, and they couldn't operate and do reconstructive surgery on my uterus right away because I was so weak that I would risk death. So I had to spend 2 weeks with the blood transfusions and getting stronger until they could reconstruct my uterus, at which point they couldn't salvage all of it. It had to be reconstructed smaller, which in turn meant that when I was lucky enough to become pregnant with my son later on, I could not have a full-term pregnancy because my uterus wasn't as flexible and big. And so I was forced to have a C-section prematurely so that he could survive and I wouldn't risk death. I tell you all this because it is extremely important for those who believe that women have the right to live and achieve, to support legislation, candidates, and politicians that show that with their actions. It is imperative that all women have access to every possible reliable form of contraception, of hormonal treatment, of reproductive health treatment that will allow them to flourish. If I didn't have access to all of this, I wouldn't have been able to graduate from law school, become a licensed lawyer, and there I have defended the rights of artists to their work. I have defended the right of fence-lined communities against international polluters. I have defended the right of low-income Virginians to housing, not just affordable, but also healthy, healthful housing, and the rights of children, the children that we all love and cherish, to access education that's free of discrimination on the basis of race or disability. We need elected officials that will support legislation here in Virginia, across the nation, federally, so that all women can receive the medical treatment they need throughout their lives, because we change as we age, so whatever is appropriate at some age may not be appropriate at another. And I want to make sure that women are not denied reproductive health treatments because it can cost them their lives. Thank you so much.
Oh my gosh, and that is just the most powerful way for us to close today. Thank you, Val, for sharing your story. I think it really highlights that not only is the right to contraception about the right to plan our families, but for many of us, it's about just the ability to be able to get out of bed and go to work every day. And that's what is at risk here today. So I want to thank all our speakers, our champions of reproductive freedom. I do want to give a shout out to the Democrats that we currently have in Congress who are champions of the Right to Contraception Act, Senator Kaine and Senator Warner. Our whole Democratic delegation, Congresswoman Spanberger, has been on national cable talking about the Right to Contraception Act and the importance of passing that and protecting that. Congresswoman Wexton, Congresswoman Jennifer McClellan has been a huge champion of reproductive freedom, and just everyone in the Democratic delegation in Congress that Virginia is so lucky to have. But the reality is there are not enough Democrats in Congress to get this passed. And so we need people on the record as to whether or not they support the contraception and how are they going to vote. I was just reading the Virginia pilot the other day, and Congresswoman Jen Kiggins, who has not been forced to vote on that yet because Speaker Johnson has not even brought it to the floor, dodged the question of whether or not she would vote for the Right to Contraception Act. So that is what's at stake. I want to thank you everyone for joining us today. For next steps here, I'm going to invite the speakers to do photos here with Bert, and then if any supporters or elected officials would like to be in the photos, we invite you to join us as well. And then if there are any press here, we're happy to do a stand-up scrum off to the side. Thank you all so much for being here, and that concludes our program.
Thank you so much. It was great to be here.
Okay, Bert, tell us how you want us.